It's that time of year when many families are opening financial aid offers and making commitments for college next fall. And often they're in for a bit of sticker shock. How can anybody afford to pay those bills? Well, a company right here in our region has been making it all easier a little bit for the past 40 years. No, ECSI doesn't pay the bill for you, but it does allow the payments to spread the payments, and it even processes all those student loans. John Lynch is president and CEO of ECSI. Welcome. Good to see you.
Oh, thank you, Bill. Nice to be here.
Yeah, you're sort of an unsung story here in our region. I'm amazed at the impact you have nationwide. First off, what does ECSI stand for?
That's Educational Computer Systems, Inc.
Okay, so you bring technology into the world of higher education on the back end of all the financial processing, right?
We do. So ECSI, again, was founded in 1972, so we're 39 years old right now. We are in 1,300 colleges and universities across the country in 49 states. And from processing student loan payments to actually offering deferred tuitions, we're doing this for hundreds of thousands of kids and taking phone calls and processing deferments and cancellations, etc. But you know, the ease of payment comes in the form of kids can now do this via ACH, which is a debit of their bank accounts versus the traditional check. Credit card's an option, which I don't think I would highly recommend because there's obviously
not
fees.
A good idea if you can avoid it, right?
But
yeah.
Unfortunately, it's still part of our world today.
Sure.
And then on the tuition side of things, though, you know, today it's very hard for a family to come up with that full tuition up front, with the financial aid not being quite what it was in the past. So deferred tuition is something else that's offered in many of the schools across the country, where you can pay your tuition over 10 months versus all lump sum up front.
So who's your client?
It's the school in all cases. So we are under contract with a school, and that's 1,300 of them, like as I mentioned, and then we are responsible for that student body. So we do all of the billing. We take all the phone calls for any issues they may have with their mainly student loans, but also in many of those cases with tuitions as well.
Now, your dad started the company
39 years ago.
How did he get into it in the first place?
So my dad was what they call a senior systems analyst at Duquesne University, and back in the 70s, early 70s, you can imagine what kind of computer systems were available. It wasn't much.
Sure.
So he put a system in at Duquesne, and Chatham College at the time, now Chatham University, approached him after this system was in place and said, is there any way we can get a service out of this? Could we buy this software? So he said, boy, yes, and started offering those services. And once the business just started percolating a little bit, he left Duquesne and went on his own.
How many people do you have now?
136, soon to be 140 people down in Robinson Township.
That's really great. So still growing, still doing some hiring, yeah? Doing
great. We have set record sales for the last 20 years. We have grown our database of schools by about 1,000% over the last 5 years. We have added about 30% employees over the last 3 years. So business has been great, and the student loan business isn't going away. It's actually going to become bigger versus smaller. So
you think so? Now the federal government's taken over a lot of that. Does that affect you at all?
Well, yes and no. You know, the Obama administration has decided to take a big portion of that student loan servicing and processing in-house under something called the Direct Loan Program. But our loans are outside of the area that Obama was after, basically. So for right now, we feel safe, Bill.
Well, especially focused on the not-for-profit, higher education. Do you also play in the for-profit space, the career schools?
We do. So EDMC, right here locally in town, is a big client of ours, as well as the University of Phoenix and several, DeVry, and several of the larger for-profits. So as you know, they're somewhat under attack right now, and I'm not so sure that is fair, but that's the way the government's treating it right now.
Wow, so you've gone from being in this sleepy back-end processing sort of thing to being at front and center in the way the federal student loans are being administered, the whole career school thing. It's got to be a really rapidly changing world for you.
It's a rapidly changing world, and one of the problems today is something called the gap. So if I could explain that for a second. If you go to school at a place like Carnegie Mellon, it's going to be $50,000+ with room and board, tuitions, etc. The federal government's only going to give you monies for X amount of that, and there's something called the gap, and the gap could be upwards of $30,000 to $40,000. How does a family come up with that $40,000? That's where the interesting things start coming into play. Private loans were pretty big. With the economic crash or the decline of our economy over the last few years, private loans became less of an entity. but they have to come back in full force right now because of that gap. It's got to be, you know, satisfied with something outside of federal monies. And that's really where the for-profits, I think, are really looking to see where can we get the monies, because our kids can't qualify for all the federal monies they need.
Well, big issues. Obviously, skills in higher education critically important to the kind of economy we've built here in our region over the last 30 years. You guys are a great example of the kind of company that's sprung up here and have been part of it all.
Well, thank you. It's a great business. As I said, we're just about out of space down in Robinson, so we're ready to expand our facility for another 10,000 square feet. So we see a very, very bright future.
All right. Well, exciting. John Lynch, President and CEO of ECSI. Thank you so much.
Bill, thank you very much for having me.
And we'll be back in a minute with more of our region's business. Stay with us.